Welcome. I am so delighted. I'm just full of emotion this morning. I'm Kathy O'Bear. She, they pronouns. Take a deep breath. Thank you for coming to the first Leading White Accountability Groups. Create racially inclusive teams, anti-racist organizations. I'm here in Denver, Colorado, the ancestral lands, unceded, stolen lands here in the United States of the Arapaho, Cheyenne, Ute, Lakota. So we take another deep breath together. If you think about the lands where you are, maybe where you grew up, where you've been, how much do you know about all the different indigenous groups, whatever country you're in? Their experiences over the centuries, genocide, exploitation, extraction, their experiences today, contributions over the centuries today, and how much you know as you do anti-racism work. How much are you including the history and current dynamics of all groups of minoritized, racially indigenous folk? My first gentle nudge. So let's take a deep breath. While we're here, if you've got any history of racism, white supremacy around the world, this calendar from Equal Justice Initiative, if someone can pop that in the chat, History of Racial Injustice, Equal Justice Initiative. If you don't know EJI.org, I encourage you to join, get resources from them. I like to start. I learned this from Dr. Rachel Forrester. I doing the doctor because people of marginalized identities rarely get acknowledged. And the only reason I have a doctorate is because of my white privilege, class privilege, able-bodied privilege, U.S. privilege. I could keep going. And so you may know that in the United States, just a week ago, on September 15th, 1963, they say white segregationists, I want to say white supremacist, violent terrorists, bombed the 16th Street Baptist Church. Just breathe. My guess is you knew about that. My challenge to you is how many folks bring in history as you're with colleagues you work with, you're on Facebook, Instagram, how much bring in the history of white terrorism, racism, white supremacy in white accountability groups, and just gently bring it in and then invite people to bring in some the next time, or what do you know? So if you've got some in the chat today, 1906 in Atlanta, and this is just one of hundreds, if not thousands, after alleged assaults of 4 white women, 10,000 white men terrorized, violently attacked, murdered, killed a city's Black community, killing between 24 and 40. We know it's much more than that. And then yesterday, 2011, Georgia, 12 years ago. Georgia executed Troy Davis despite strong evidence, recounting of evidence, witness saying no, that they had lied or pulled it back, and still refused to not perpetrate more racist terrorism against Black folk. Just breathe. So again, you may not start your first white accountability group in the way I just did, but y'all are coming to learn how to lead them. Many of y'all are doing the work already. And so I want to just drop things in because I'm not going to necessarily be linear. And yet, let me share with you my intentions. I intend this to be interactive with the chat at times. Towards the end, I'll ask for dilemmas and questions. I won't get to them all, but my hope is I might do extra videos to answer the questions, and then each time we'll do some. But I want to share some of my approaches. My intent to this, I have a book coming out, Leading White Accountability Groups, in January. If I, look at the copy editor's notes this weekend. And I wanted to do something for folks that for reading is not the way that they might bring in their information. And I also wanted something that would be open, even though the book will be on the website and open access and free. I wanted something that people could do in chunks. So thank you for coming so that I can share approaches, insight, activities, resources, experiences. While 25 years ago, we started the Social Justice Training Institute, and we started doing white caucuses. That's what we call them. I call them whiteness caucuses now, because as you know, folks that are multiracial, biracial, present white, might be indigenous, Latino, we could keep going, but Middle Eastern would come, and they come to the ones you're leading. The focus is on dismantling racism and whiteness and white supremacy culture. So I call them whiteness caucuses there. I do want time for dilemmas. So while I'm going to record the input that I give. In the next several sessions, you might be in breakouts if I can figure out how to do it with this many people, but I'm pretty sure we can. I want you to experience some of these activities. So it's not just cognitive, which is one of the traps if you identify as white, that we stay intellectual in our heads. We're socialized that way. So I do want you to experience. It won't be the full 10, 15 minutes necessarily, but some, so that we can then talk about how do you do it. And then again, if there's space for whatever else. And my intentions are to learn with you. I want to be clear, there are so many approaches, so many people I've learned with. I don't know if you have Dr. Robin DiAngelo's latest book she co-authored with Amy Bertain, The Facilitator's Guide for White Affinity Groups. I just saw on LinkedIn this morning that she's offering a course starting in October that probably highlights this book as well as other things. Layla Syed's work, Me and White Supremacy. And so if there are other resources you do and have and people you've learned with on how to lead, and again, they don't have to be published authors. It could be your colleague. It could be maybe something feel free to add that to the chat. I want this to be a place where people can just share resources. But if you need things before I'm sharing them, because all I'm going to share is the things that I know to be true that seem to work for me given my style. If you want things faster, there are other resources. And on this website, by the way, my www.drkathyberry.com for folks that are on the phone, /leading, LEADING. All of the worksheets in the upcoming book are there. There's like 49 that are in the book referenced, and then another 10 or 15, and then, I don't know, 10 or so videos that I referenced. All free, open access, and that's available now. These 2 radio shows that I did, it was 2.5 years ago, aren't bad. And so if you're like, how do you start a white accountability group? The material and probably the first one has much that'll be in the book, My Best Thinking Inside an Organization. I'm sure I have more, especially much of what I'm sharing. A lot of it I learned when Rachel Forrester called and said, after George Floyd was murdered, do you want to do something? And we did about a year plus of live white accountability groups on Zoom. And so a lot of what I know today is from what I learned with Rachel, with the folks. And so this is older material. So if you really want to analyze what I was like before and what I'm like now, that would be fun. All right. Time to get going. This is again recorded, and in the chat, you have a chance to breathe, reflect, and choose to participate if you want. I'd like you to consider naming your racialized group identities. And again, for some of you, you might have 2, 3, 4 ways that you name yourselves. I know as a white person, I'm entering excited, a tad more grounded, but just so full of energy to show up and learn with you, and a tad nervous, but not too nervous, because I'm like with my people. So I enter feeling, just kind of breathe in so that you really get some other feelings. Curious, hopeful. And thanks for naming yourself African American, because my guess is 20% might be folks of color, indigenous folk, sometimes more. When I do national conference workshops like this, it can be 20 to 30% of folks. So again, in the Q&A, as we keep going, again, I'm doing 6 of these this fall. I'll do more in the winter, and who knows, spring. You may already know, or you may not know, that the folks come. I never say no to folk. We focus on whiteness, dismantling white supremacy, and we can talk about, if you have a mixed race group with monoracial, multiracial, indigenous folk, what you can do. A lot of curiosity, excitement. Woohoo, just keep breathing. I saw a little guarded. That's a kind of honesty I love, eager. And when you're forming, I actually start most groups like this. And really supporting those that say, I'm actually a little nervous, scared, my racism will show. I don't know very much. I'm afraid that people here know more than me. So as facilitators, you can tell stories about when you used to be, or even right now. The truth is, we got 164 folk here. There are folks here that may have been doing this work differently for a year that I'm going to be learning with. It could be folks that have never led a group that will share something that'll catch me off guard, or you might notice a white supremacist attitude that I have that I don't know. And so while I'm sharing what I know, the fear of not doing it right, not being perfect, it's getting recorded. So just breathe if any of that's up in you. I encourage you to stay grounded and breathing the entire time. Because while this is a sharing and workshop-ish, you may bump into hot buttons, triggers, you might see yourself in the material. And so just keep breathing, because as facilitators, conveners, at any moment, we could get knocked off our game. That's some of the language I use around navigating difficult situations, hot buttons. All my books are free on my website, download, but I like to do commercials. I hadn't planned to. The first one was Navigating Difficult Situations, Turn the Tide. And it was the dissertation, UMass Amherst. Folks were so good. So navigating hot buttons, but it's really about navigating ourselves so we show up clear instruments. We'll probably do a whole session on how to share triggers and navigating that in the work group that you're doing. Mostly, I'm worried about us showing up clear instruments of change so that we can tell stories, be self as instrument. Excuse me. I found this Lewis Brandeis. Most of the things worth doing in the world have been declared impossible for they were done. I'm just reminded, as I was with the Social Justice Training Institute facilitators doing a webinar yesterday, how the ancestors, especially in this country, Indigenous, Black, Latino, Asian American, particularly probably Chinese in the West, when there was so much oppression over the centuries, impossible to think the progress that was made from, with some white change agents, the change we've made over the centuries. And so today, in this context, with renewed, rekindled, empowered white supremacy, fascism, everywhere I look on the news, everywhere I look in politics, just breathe, internationally in too many nations, it can feel impossible and overwhelming. And so folks coming to these groups will feel hopeless despair, as I still struggle with. And today I'm feeling more excited by these people that are here. You're doing the work. I want to thank you for the work you're doing. And when I feel hopeless and despair, remembering the work around racism, white supremacy, and other forms of oppression that so many have done before, then it's like, okay, let me go do my part.